For a while, it felt like Sony's APS-C lineup was comfortable. Maybe too comfortable. The A6700 was solid, arguably one of the best hybrid APS-C cameras out there, but it didn't feel like a statement. But now something feels different. The Sony A6900 rumors don't just hint at an upgrade, they hint at intent, a shift. A quiet message from Sony that they're not just participating in the APS-C space anymore, they're ready to dominate it again. If even half of what we're hearing turns out to be true, the Sony A6900 might not just be another release. This might be Sony saying, "We're back." Let's get one thing out of the way. These are still rumors, but they're not random guesses either. They follow a pattern, and more importantly, they align with where the industry is heading. At the center of everything is a new 33-megapixel stacked APS-C sensor. And this is where things get interesting. Sony stepping into stacked sensor territory for APS-C isn't just a spec upgrade, it's a philosophical shift. Stacked sensors mean faster readout speeds, reduced rolling shutter, and potentially blackout-free shooting. In real-world terms, faster action capture, cleaner results, and a shooting experience that feels closer to flagship full-frame cameras. Then comes the Bionz XR2 processor, which, if true, puts this camera in a completely different league. We're talking about 30 frames per second with an electronic shutter and around 15 FPS mechanically. That's not just fast, that's borderline professional sports territory. But here's the twist. Performance comes with compromise. The rumored limited buffer capacity suggests that while the camera can shoot incredibly fast, it might not sustain those bursts for long. It's like having a sports car that accelerates insanely fast but runs out of road quicker than you'd like. Stabilization is another area getting serious attention. An 8.5-stop IBIS system would be a major leap, especially for handheld shooters. That's the kind of improvement you feel instantly, not in specs, but in confidence. Design-wise, Sony seems to be making subtle but meaningful changes. A slightly thicker body for better grip, additional customizable buttons, and a more refined handling experience suggest they're listening, at least a little. On the video side, the A6900 doesn't chase unnecessary hype like 8K. Instead, it focuses on practicality, oversampling 4K 60p from a higher resolution source, plus 4K 120p with a slight crop. This feels like Sony doubling down on usability rather than spec sheet bragging. But not everything sounds perfect. A single CF Express Type A card slot is a bold and controversial choice. It screams performance but also raises concerns about flexibility and reliability, especially for professionals who rely on dual-slot redundancy. Overall, the leaks paint a picture of a camera that's fast, capable, and ambitious, but also slightly constrained by design decisions that may not please everyone. To understand why the A6900 matters, we need to look at what the A6700 didn't quite get right. Now, don't get me wrong, the A6700 is a fantastic camera, but it also felt like a safe one. First, the 26MP sensor. It's reliable, sure, but in a world where competitors are pushing 32MP, 40MP and beyond, it started to feel a bit stagnant. Not outdated, but not exciting either. For photographers who love cropping, wildlife shooters for example, that extra resolution matters more than people admit. Then there's the IBIS performance. It works, but it's not class-leading. When you're shooting handheld in challenging conditions, those extra stops of stabilization can make or break a shot. Another issue, the overall feel of the camera. The A6700 is compact, but sometimes that compactness comes at the cost of ergonomics. A slightly better grip or more physical controls could have made a big difference in day-to-day use. And let's not ignore the single card slot limitation, which continues to be a sticking point for many users. At a certain price point, expectations shift. People want redundancy, security, and flexibility. Lastly, while the A6700 is a strong hybrid camera, some users felt it leaned too much toward video without fully committing to still photography improvements, especially in areas like viewfinder quality and tactile control. So when people talk about the A6900, they're not just asking for more specs, they're asking for corrections. Fix what didn't feel complete, push where things felt held back. This is where things get really interesting, because the community isn't unified, not even close. Some people are genuinely excited. The idea of a stacked APS-C sensor alone has photographers dreaming. Faster readouts, better performance for wildlife and sports, and potentially a smoother shooting experience. It's everything action shooters have been waiting for in a compact body. There's also excitement around the resolution bump. For many, 33 MP feels like the sweet spot, high enough for cropping and detail, but not so high that it becomes a burden on storage and processing. But then comes the skepticism. A lot of users are questioning whether this camera is too good to be true. Some feel that these specs sound dangerously close to full-frame territory and that Sony might intentionally hold back to protect its higher-end lineup. Others are more practical in their concerns. The single card slot is a major talking point. For casual users, it might not matter, but for professionals or even serious enthusiasts, it's a deal-breaker. There's a strong demand for dual slots, ideally one CF Express and one SD, to balance speed and convenience. Another common request? Better usability features. People want a joystick, improved screen quality, a higher resolution EVF, and better overall handling. It's not always about specs, sometimes it's about how the camera feels in your hands. Then there's the lens conversation. Some users argue that pushing resolution to 33 MP on APS-C raises a bigger question. Do the lenses keep up? Not every APS-C lens is designed to resolve that level of detail, which means users might be forced to invest in higher-end glass, raising the overall cost of ownership. Price is another concern. If the A6900 lands in the $1,700 to $2,000 range, it starts getting dangerously close to entry-level full-frame territory. And at that point, many buyers might pause and reconsider their options. And yet, despite all the doubts, there's a consistent underlying feeling. People are paying attention again. That alone says a lot. The Sony A6900, if it turns out even partially true, represents more than just a spec upgrade. It represents a decision about what APS-C should be in 2026. For years, APS-C cameras have lived in the shadow of full frame. They've been seen as stepping stones, backup bodies, or entry points. But the A6900 rumors suggest something different. A camera that doesn't apologize for being APS-C, but instead embraces its strengths: speed, reach, compactness. But ambition comes with risk. If Sony pushes too far, they risk cannibalizing their own lineup. If they hold back too much, they risk losing ground to competitors who are no longer playing it safe. And then there's the bigger question. Who is this camera really for? If it's for enthusiasts, the price needs to stay grounded. If it's for professionals, features like dual card slots and improved ergonomics become non-negotiable. Right now, the A6900 sits in an interesting and slightly uncertain position between those two worlds. Personally, I think this is exactly what Sony needs. Not perfection, not balanced, but intent. The A6900 doesn't need to be flawless. It just needs to feel like Sony is trying again, really trying, to lead the APS-C space instead of just maintaining it. Because for the first time in a while, it feels like something is coming. And if Sony gets this right, this won't just be another camera launch. It'll be a comeback. Thanks for watching.